This is episode number 177. Today, we're featuring artist Lon Brauer, the artist who's been winning all the big awards lately.
This is the PleinAir Podcast with Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called plein air, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plein air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhoads.
Why, thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome everybody to the PleinAir Podcast. I hope you're doing well. I know these are crazy times, and it's important to keep your sanity. One of the best ways to do that is to keep focusing on your growth as a painter, learning and growing, learning new things. I have been live each day trying to help you do that at 12 noon Eastern. And we're trying to keep things upbeat, keep your head in the right place. And I'm giving marketing advice, prizes, and offering 2 video instruction segments a day from some of the over 400 artists that we represent. To find me live, go to Eric Rhoads, that's RHOADS, and follow me. Don't do a friend request on Facebook because I have limits on how many I can do, and they don't let me have any more, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would. But you can still follow me on Facebook, or you can follow me on Instagram at Eric Rhoads, and I'm on YouTube at Streamline Art Video. Just go to YouTube, search Streamline Art Video, and hit the follow or subscribe button. All right, just go there and search Streamline Art Video and subscribe. If you have been watching those, you would have learned that I announced a big dream that I've been working on, bringing all the plein air painters in the world together for a global virtual event. That's right. It's going to be amazing, and it's going to be something you're going to want to be a part of. And to be signed up to be notified or to learn more, go to PleinAirLive.com. That's PleinAir Live. It's coming up on July 15th, and there's a 4 days of virtual summit. It's going to be so cool. Plus, there's a 5th optional day, a first day actually, for beginners, people who are brand new to plein air, who want to know the ropes about equipment, about various forms of paint, about all the things they need to know, and that will save you a couple of years. Though my Adirondack 10-year anniversary event is now sold out, there are more things that we offer you to do. We're moving forward as planned with the Plein Air Convention, August in Santa Fe, first time in the summertime. And we have an amazing lineup, and we have a money-back guarantee, too, of course, just in case you or we have to cancel or reschedule due to coronavirus or the conditions at the moment. So you can visit pleinairconvention.com to learn more about that. And the lineup is as good as any lineup we've ever had. A reminder that at the end of the month, it's the last chance to enter to win the Plein Air Salon Art Competition. There's a $15,000 grand prize, lots of other prizes for the monthly competitions, but also for the annual. And if you win in any category in the monthly, you not only if you get entered into the national competition for the big prize, which we present at the Plein Air Convention. And so there's not too many more of those. I think there's one more, probably the month of July, and then we're going to be doing the judging and have it for the Plein Air Convention for on stage. So enter at pleinairsalon.com, and we don't have to have fresh paintings. We don't believe that that's the way art competition should go. You can have any painting you've ever done, and of course, every judge. It's really interesting because some judges like certain types of paintings and others don't, and so you can see somebody enter something one time and not get judged in, and then they enter it again. Another judge goes, "Wow, I like this painter." The other thing that's interesting, we use a lot of gallery people, and a lot of them are discovering painters and inviting them into their gallery, so that's pretty cool too. No guarantees on that, of course. Coming up after the interview, I'm going to be answering some art marketing questions in the Art Marketing Minute. But first, let's get right to our interview with the amazing Lon Brauer.
Lon Brauer, welcome to the PleinAir Podcast.
Hey, Eric.
thanks for having me on. This is quite an honor. I've listened to a bunch of the podcasts in the past, and they're always interesting. So hopefully this will be as interesting as well.
Well, if it's not interesting, nobody will listen.
Yeah, there you go. You can just throw it out.
No pressure.
Yeah, there you go.
So, Lon, you and I met in the Adirondacks, and as happens very rarely, but happened when you were there, everybody was clamoring to your work. Everybody was in love with your work, and your work stands out because it's different than what everybody else tends to be doing. So I want to talk about that today, among some other things. I know that you've been kind of, before coronavirus, you were rocking it. You were winning lots of awards, getting invited to a lot of events. So let's kind of start from the beginning. How did this whole painting thing begin for you?
Well, if I go all the way back to the beginning, I started like everybody else as a kid. I was drawing and painting and making things as a kid, but the idea of being an artist, for a career or anything like that was, that was just a pipe dream. My dad was a pharmacist and my mom was a nurse, and I'm the oldest of four, so I was going to be a pharmacist. And so my, going through school was all about, math, science, and English, and those sorts of things. It was, very academic. And, any art classes that were available in grade school and high school, I just really didn't have time for it. It didn't fit in my schedule. But I had an opportunity to, there was a guy in town, I grew up in Illinois and lived in a small town, and there was a fellow there who worked for International Paper. We had a plant there, and he was one of their graphics people. And, well, he was the graphics. He was the whole department. But he also did painting on the side, and he gave lessons. So I was able to get hooked up with him when I was about 15, I guess. And it was just basic once a week art classes, and we started out with still lifes and working in charcoal. And within about 3 weeks, we were doing portraits because that was his thing. And so I think that's where I kind of got the figurative bug. But
and
again,
what age were you at the time?
About 15,
yeah.
16, something like that. So,
right.
But when it came time to go to college, it's like, well, what am I going to do? I went to a few. Mom and Dad took me to several schools, and we interviewed, and they said, he could be. Yeah, he's got a pretty good portfolio, but he's gonna. If you're not going to teach, what are you going to do with it? So, this is Midwest, and. So I ended up going to a liberal arts college for a couple of years, thinking that I would get a biology degree, and because that was my next strongest thing. And I took a few classes there in painting classes, and I thought, no, this is what I need to do. And that's when I transferred to Washington University in St. Louis, and went through their program. And so, but I came out of school as a painter, a figurative painter primarily, and. This was 1976 to 80, and the faculty there were all abstract expressionists. De Kooning was still painting, and Rauschenberg, and all these guys, but the program was set up in such a way that that's what they did, but they taught a fairly good core. They had a good core program. Drawing was very important, and in fact, we had one guy that I just adored there. He taught figure drawing, and it was very, I wouldn't call it academic, but it was the fundamentals were there.
Right.
And but anyway, I came out of school and I thought, okay, what am I going to do with this? So and I was getting panicky. I had a whole summer where I didn't do a whole lot but pour concrete, and then a friend of mine who was working at a photography studio called me and said, we need some help. It was they were doing studio work, catalog work, and said, we need some help in the darkroom. Were you interested? And I said, oh, yeah. And, I did that. I was going to be a part-time gig, and I went from working in the darkroom to eventually being an assistant. And then, within a year, I was a shooter, and it ended up being a 30-year career. So
30 years.
Yeah, it wasn't planned at all. It was just, I'm glad I did it. I mean, it was a great, great thing to do. But the whole time I was doing it, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but I'm a painter. So when the time in 1991, I opened my own studio, and I had a good stable of clients, and every time they would bring a project, I was shooting widgets primarily. It was, like I said, it was catalog work, but there were times when I could stretch a little bit. And, as here I'm working with view cameras, I'm working with film, and I'm working with, photographic images, but I'm trying to always to make them painterly. And as was anybody else at that time. This was in the 90s. So we were doing all kinds of, this was before Photoshop, so we're trying to do all kinds of manipulations in the camera to make the image, although it's photographic, to make it look as if it has that painterly quality, whatever that is. And, we got into things like Polaroid transfers, where you can take an 8x10 Polaroid and transfer it to a piece of paper, so now it feels like a piece of art as opposed to just a slick photo image.
Mm-hmm.
And,
I used to do that.
So, so and I was doing all kinds of, and I actually early on I started doing all kinds of manipulations in darkroom where I'm playing with different development speeds. First you take the film and you're pushing and pulling, and then you're scratching the film, and then you're making prints, and and then you're distressing the print, and then you're going into the stop, and then you're going into the fixer, and maybe you go in the fixer and then try to go back to the developer and the flashing stuff, all this kind of stuff. And but the whole time I'm doing it, it's a job, and it's working well, and I was pretty good at it, but it was all window dressing, and I've got friends who are photographers now, and I talk to them, and they say, photography's an art, and I said, I guess it is, but it's also kind of a mechanical thing. If you take 10 photographers and throw them into a room and give them all the same project, they're all going to kind of come up with the same image. And at the time that I was thinking about that, kind of the limitations of the medium. I'm not trying to offend any photographers out there, because I'm sure there are people who think quite differently about it. But I was looking at illustrators and what they were doing, and painters as well, and the options that you had. And you could have 10 illustrators and give them a project, and they're all going to come up with something quite different. And that was really the thing that was always in the back of my head. If I ever get a chance to do, be a painter or an illustrator, whatever, doing things with my hands as opposed to doing things mechanically with a camera, that's where I want to be.
So what led you out of that situation into painting? I assume you didn't do any painting that whole time.
I did. In fact, I had a good client. I did a lot of medical supplies. I had a client that I was with for about 10 years. I was a freelancer, so I wasn't connected with them, but I was their only shooter. And I was doing, it was all throwaway stuff. So there was tubing and syringes and needles and chest drainage and urine bags and all these kinds of things, and everything had to be photographed. And about the time we'd get through their full product line, then they'd have to do it again. But they also did trade magazines and convention displays where they would have they'd have what they called a beauty shot of, I don't know, a urine bag, and you have to know how to do that. And but the backgrounds for these things, maybe it'd be tubing, but what I would be able to do, they'd allow me to do would create a piece of art to go behind the tubing. It's just tubing, but there would be maybe an image of how it is used. I know I did a series of backgrounds. We did a whole series of products, and I'd used my oldest boy. He was 8 or 9 at the time, I think, and I photographed him. And it was what was it? It was for chest drainage. So you have to actually cut a hole in the side between the ribs, and you run this tube in for pressure. And so we had the product, and it would sit on top of this drawing that I made of him. With there's an anatomical drawings and all this sort of thing. So it gave me a way to marry the two disciplines, and it was a way for me to keep a hand in the I don't say art field, but in painting and drawing, if you will.
So how did you make the transition from that to where you are now?
It was made for me. When everything went digital in around 2000, I could see it coming, and I thought, I don't know if I want to do this. And because I'd been shooting with film, and that's all I knew because I didn't know anything when I started, and so I learned everything on the job. And the only thing I knew was shooting with an 8x10 camera. So I'm working with large film, and in fact, when I see somebody with a 35 millimeter camera, I'm thinking, what is that little thing? I had no relationship to it at all. But when things started going digital, I started getting these calls from my clients. Most of my clients were manufacturers, and they would call me and say, Mike in R&D now has a camera. And I knew what that meant. That meant that, the Mike, who was probably somebody's nephew, says, I'm working here in R&D, and I've got a camera. I could do this cheaper, and I wouldn't have to do R&D anymore. I could be their photographer.
I can take pictures. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody can take a picture, and and so little by little things just kept getting less and less. And I thought, well, I can do one of two things. I could fire up and try to get, I'm going to have to get more equipment. I'm going to have to get somebody to do. Because they were not only did you have to then do the photography, but they also wanted you to do pre-press, which is you had to take not only shoot the image, then take the image and prepare it so it can go to the printer, as opposed to the old days when the printer would take care of that. I thought I'm just not wanting to gear up that way, so I thought I think while things are kind of in flux, I'm going to start painting again. So that's what I did, and I had space. I had a large space downtown St. Louis, and I certainly didn't need it for photography. I mean, I still had jobs going, but I just didn't need that kind of space. But I had space to paint, and that's when I started, really trying to learn the vocabulary again. Pull the paints out and see what I can do. I had a bunch of hollow core doors, and what I would do is, it's a great surface. I mean, they were down in the dumpster, and I pulled them out, cleaned them up, and put gessoed them down. But it gave me a nice hard surface just to play around with it. And I was smearing paint this way and that and doing drawings and kind of relying on stuff I already had. It was all figurative work, but it was all conceptual, if you will, because I didn't have a model in front of me. And just to get my hands dirty again. And, started getting into, I submitted a few things to some local shows, got in and won some awards and made some sales. And I'm thinking, maybe this could work. But I didn't give up everything else. It was like one just sort of faded away as the other one was getting built. So,
well, and that's an old story now in the sense that the whole digital revolution changed everything for photographers, for graphic designers, even for illustrators. Everything changed as a result of that.
Well, it's like I had a friend, I haven't talked to him in a long time, as a typesetter. What do you do with a typesetter? It's just,
right.
And he used to type. I used to do a newsletter for one of for the photo organization, the ASMP in St. Louis, and every month I'd have to go over him and I'd say, okay, here's what I've got. Can you put it in the galleys? And he would send it back to me, and I would actually, it's waxed on the back, and you put it down, you put it all together, all by hand. That's all gone. And not only that, the guy that I used to use, he was the photo lab that I used to go to, where they did all the transparency film processing. But it all went away, and now you can't buy film.
Yeah, you can't buy film.
But
right.
you got to have some connections to be able to get film. And Polaroid's gone, and it just changed, and I think it changed so much faster than what people anticipated. I mean, we said it was going to happen. And then of course, when you put Photoshop in, and I still shoot a little bit, and I use Photoshop for everything. But
So, in terms of the whole PleinAir thing, how did that begin for you?
Well, that happened around in 2010. I think it was 2010. I had a client. I was doing some small photo jobs for him. He was doing a brochure for a Chamber of Commerce for a small town just west of St. Louis. It's out in the wine country, and he called me and said, hey, I got this job. If you're interested, there's no money in it, but they'll feed you. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll go out. And it was out at a winery. He said, they're doing this thing called PleinAir, and they're painters. I said, oh, that sounds interesting. So I get out there, and it was supposed to be a sunset paint out, and I got there at 3 p.m, and there's painters everywhere. They're sitting in the fields, they're standing, they've got easels, and they're painting, and they're drinking wine and all. I thought, and I walked around, and I was doing just kind of what they call run and gun shots. It was just shooting a bunch of stuff, and then the client would pick 3 and put it in a brochure. I thought, I could do this. So when it comes around next year, I'm going to do this, because I didn't know anything about the PleinAir world. And so I did. And the next year I did it, and I did painting, did 2 paintings, 3 paintings. It was actually in the same location, and I won an award, and I sold it. I'm thinking, this is great. Of course, that I said everybody's doing plein air painting because it's so easy, and I realized no, that's not quite the case. But from there, I just I started looking for more events, and and then started finding out how to jury into events, and or how to submit to jury, and then I got in, and smaller events, and then you just keep looking. Okay, what's the next step up? What's the next step up? And I really did see it as a ladder. How could I first of all, get recognized by my peers, and then how could I get recognized by judges, and how can I get recognized by collectors, and so on and so forth. Maybe not in that order, but that sort of thing. So
what year was that first St. Louis event?
That was 2011. So I've been doing this for about 9-10 years now. And I did an event in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. It's just on the other side of Harrisburg, and they don't do it anymore. But I went there, and that was kind of the first one where I realized if I want to make this thing happen, I got to go to as many events as I can get into, and just be a workhorse. That's the approach I'm going to take, and that's what I did. And and the other thing too was I was doing a lot of work, and it wasn't a matter of, well, at first it was just making, I was making yellow-green paintings like everybody else, and I thought, I've got to set myself apart from everyone somehow or other, and how can I do that? And how can I make, and like I said, I'm primarily, I still consider myself a figurative artist. How can I make landscape be interesting to me? And I found that I make it interesting by painting the things that I want to paint, which is usually an object or, something that is isolated in the center, which basically is a portrait of something other than a human being. So I was playing that game, trying to figure out how can I do this and really, really, really enjoy it.
And the result was you started winning all these awards.
Well, yes and no. One of the things I found was I kept going back to what I knew, and what I knew when I was, it was a long time ago. Then at that point, I look back, what was I doing in school? Well, I was doing things like, kind of coming back to the abstract expressionist. It's not necessarily Pollock, but kind of like Pollock, and where I'm throwing paint and I'm scratching paint and I'm using sandpaper and trying all these different things. And I found that I needed to keep it within a certain realm because, number one, to get juried in, you have to you can't go too far off the rails in order to get into the event. And then once I got into the event, you can't go off too far off the rail if your intent is to either win awards or to sell. So I was playing kind of the conservative card, if you will, and not doing things as bold as I would really like to. That didn't get me anywhere. It really didn't, because I was just part of many on a wall. And I thought, well, if I'm not going to sell and I'm not going to win, I'm just going to have fun with it and just go ahead and just start throwing some interesting things on the wall. And I think that lack of success, in a way, I was getting into the show, so that's a success. But the lack of selling and awards to begin with kind of gave me a freedom to try some new things and to really look at it a little differently. How can I play in this genre and yet stretch it? Push those boundaries, push those edges, and I think it what it did was it gave me an opportunity to be true to what I wanted to do, as opposed to, like I said, muddying it up so that I didn't want to play to the audience, because that never really gets you anywhere anyway. Not really.
And what was the big lesson in all of that?
I think that the very fact that that I felt that I needed to be true to experimenting. If there's something I want to try to do, I will do it. Now, I still fight that. When I'm at an event, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to do this. I can't think of an example. Well, here, I've been doing a lot more drawing in my paintings. It's not only painting, but I'm coming back in them with vine charcoal or oil sticks or whatever it might be. So there's more drawing, line work in there. Scratching it down. I haven't taken a sander to anything yet, but I've considered that. So these kinds of things that are kind of non-traditional, and those kinds of things, it's risky to do that, I think, because you can easily be, that's interesting, but does anybody really want to look at that? So what I can find myself in the trap of, I need to pull this back a little bit because, a sale would really be kind of nice, and so I have to fight that with myself. I have two minds. But when I think of some of these experiments that I maybe can't pull the trigger on at an event, as soon as I get home, I'm on it. And so my studio time is really important in terms of exploring those to a different level, so that when I do then go back out, it seems very natural to me. If I'm going to, one of my favorite tools is a serrated steak knife, and I use that a lot for textures and certain kinds of contour lines and that sort of thing. And I use it all the time. It doesn't seem unusual for me to pull that thing out. That to me is normal. But you look at stuff on the walls, oftentimes you're not going to see that kind of thing. So.
Hey, Lon, can you hang on for just 1 second?
Sure can.
Okay, hang on. Are you there?
I am.
Okay,
yes.
We're up at our lake place, and my wife was yelling at the kids, and it was going to come through on the microphone, so I had to shut her down. Okay, so we'll continue. Here we go.
Okay.
So you're walking that fine line between being true to yourself and being true to something that's going to sell. That's always a dilemma for artists, isn't it?
I think it is. Obviously we want to make sales because we need to pay for our materials, and I'm kind of semi-retired, I would say now, but I like the income, and with things the way they are right now, my season's been kind of thrown into the dumpster, and it's tight, but the problem is, though, as soon as you start thinking about what's the customer going to want, what's the gallery going to want, and what is the what is the judge going to want, you start making compromises, and you end up with a painting that you can't feel really good about because that you've watered it down. I played that game when I was doing photography. I mean, it's commercial photography, so I have a client, and I've got there's a client, there's an account executive, and there's a creative director, there's an art director, and there's me. So it's got to go through all those people. I got to read all those people's minds, so that in the end, what may have started as a really exciting project ends up being, it's got all these compromises in it. I don't want to play that game. I really don't. I want to be able to make choices. And
so what is your best advice for artists in that scenario? Because they're always facing that issue of, do I paint to sell? Do I paint what I love? If I paint what I love and it doesn't sell, I can't paint anymore. Where do you find yourself in that?
I tell you, honestly, money aside, and I know that's a big aside. You have to paint what you want, and you have to paint it the way you want it. And I think you can find yourself, and I know some people, and I may be in the same boat, is that maybe I'm not, maybe this plein air thing is not my bucket to stand in. It's, you start asking yourself, well, okay, I want to do figure, and I want to do conceptual figure, and maybe I want to do, I I don't know, fantasy or whatever it might be, or maybe I want to do graphic novels, and that's what I really want to do. Well, that's fine. But that's that's somewhere else, and and so with the PleinAir thing. And my wife asks me this all the time. She says, "Do you really want to do this?" And I said, "Yeah, I do, because PleinAir is, number one, I'm outside. Number two, I get to travel. Number three, I get to stay at somebody's house, and they feed us like crazy. And I got good friends, and I'm making a lot of paintings. And as particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, I think there's a movement towards, I wouldn't call it avant-garde, but more edgy stuff. Not everybody's doing it. There's, I think you've got a much more interesting mix of work in most events now than maybe you had.
There's definitely a trend. There's definitely a trend in that direction. There are a lot more people getting a little bit more abstract in the way they're approaching things.
Right, and I think that's
they're selling.
I think that's a good thing. Well, I think it's a good thing because I think because we do rely on the collectors, and they're an avid group. They're just so excited about having this there. But if everybody has kind of there's a homogeneous look, then you're only going to get the collectors who are interested in that kind of work. And then we need to get young people in, and we can't always have the retirees buying stuff. We need to get the young people in, and they're going to be looking for more contemporary things and more cutting edge, if you will. So and I think if people know that I'm going to go to the gala on Friday, and I'm going to go there, and I don't know what I'm going to see. I really don't know what I'm going to see, because the events are, if they have a nice mix of artists, there's going to be a variety, something for everybody, and I think that's going to widen the audience. I think it's a good thing. I really do.
So yeah, well, I don't have an opinion. You know me. Okay. I never have an opinion about anything.
No, of course not.
I think the issue is that everybody's got to do what they feel, and some people paint, leaning abstract because that's what they feel. Some people lean tight. There's people in the middle. You got to paint what you love. I think first and foremost, I think if you don't do that, then you're not being true to yourself. Now, I do have a line that I've oftentimes used in marketing training, and that is that if it's a matter of making a living and you have to clean toilets, I'd rather be painting something, even if it's something I'd rather not paint, because at least in that scenario, I'm painting. At least I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm doing something.
Well, I agree with that. Yeah, I think that, and which gets back to your question, your original question is that, and I have, I was doing art fairs for a while. I did that for about 6 years, and kind of concurrently when I got into the PleinAir thing, and because I thought, well, I've got landscape paintings, I can put them on a wall somewhere, and I started doing that, and I had just enough success with it that I broke even and made some money. I actually made some money. I did make a lot of money because it's just a different audience, it's a different world, it's just different. But where was I going with that? Oh, I started doing. A woman came in one time in my booth, and she said, I had all these landscape paintings, and I was telling her they're PleinAir. She didn't care because that audience doesn't care. But she said, "Do you do anything bigger?" And I said, "Well, I can. I think the biggest thing I had was maybe 16 by 20." And I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Well, I've got this wall. Can you do 6 feet?" And I said, "Yeah, I can do that." And it was down in Texas. Well, it was down in Dallas. They've got one. What is it? I can't think of the name of it now. It doesn't matter. I had two shows in Texas. They were back to back. Both of them in Dallas area. One was south, one was north. And I had a week in between. So I thought, I've got this week in between where I'm just going to be hanging out. So I went to Home Depot and bought some panels, 2 foot by 4 foot panels, and put this thing together in the parking lot at the motel, and bought a bunch of paints, and I did these. They were landscapes, just all memory stuff, kind of layered. They had depth. There was a foreground, and a middle ground, and a background. There was a sky, but they were kind of conceptual, but very decorative. And I did it. I must have done 15 of those, and sold every one of them. And I didn't really. By the time I got to that point, I thought, I don't want to do this anymore, and I didn't have to. But if I really needed the money, that's something that I'm painting. I'm still painting, and I have a client base for it. So
Well, this is one of the issues that some friends of mine back east in the Vermont area, they're always outdoors painting really, really big. They have these Cape Cod easels, and they're painting 30 by 40s on location. And they laugh at me because I'm painting a 9 by 12 in the same amount of time that they're painting a 30 by 40. And they said, how can you make any money if every time you're just putting your small paintings out there? Do you have a feeling about that? Because you tend to paint larger even in the plein air event.
Yeah, I do. Well, I do because, number one, it's not a gimmick, but it's kind of fun to be able to do it. So, and I like working big because because I use big brushes and a lot of paint, and I can move around quite a bit. And I like the scale of big paintings. But I don't really, and to be honest with you, I don't have a handle on what people want. I do get, sometimes people will come in and say, I just can't put that big, I just don't have that much wall space. And so that, there is that practicality about it. And then other places, I've been in locations where they say, can you, I wish it was bigger because I got that big space, and so and then you get into situations of, your collectors, what kinds of houses do they live in? How much wall space do they have? You hate to be selling paintings because it goes with a couch or it fits between the windows, but that is part of it too. So I don't know if that answered your question or not. I do small paintings. I like doing small paintings, and I think a small painting can have just as much validity and it can be as complicated or as complex as a large painting, maybe even more so. When I'm working different sizes, I'm not really thinking about the size. If I do small paintings occasionally, I might get stuck on big paintings, and because you got a lot of acreage you got to cover, and sometimes I'll think, well, let's do a series, let's do some small stuff, just to kind of go that way, and I'll do that until I run out of steam, and then I'll go back to the big things, or I'll bounce back and forth. So, again, if you're thinking about what the collectors are going to want, that's a whole different thing. So I think if everything's equal, I think the artist really just has to paint the size that feels comfortable to them. If they choose to do small because they like doing small, that's great. If they're doing small because they're afraid of big, that's a different issue. If there's a fear or a situation where they don't have the knowledge to be able to do a large painting, and that's why they're not doing it, then that's maybe something that needs to be addressed.
So that's something that I find difficult. I find it's a lot different doing a large painting. Not only is it, of course, covering more real estate, but the idea of there's something different about when you go large. Do you have any tips or ideas for people when they're used to painting small, what they can do to get a little bit more comfortable, or how they have to do things differently?
Well, number one, it is bigger, but I think you have to. There's a fear of moving to a bigger painting because, I think with a lot of people, when I do workshops, I see this all the time. They want to work small because it's almost like when they're in a room with a bunch of people, they want to sit in a corner. They want to be as they just don't want to be bold, or they're timid. It's timid. It's just being timid, and honestly, if you got a bigger panel, get bigger brushes and squirt out more paint, and you can. It's not that hard. But it's that first step of doing it. Because I look at I've got a painting I just finished this morning. Maybe it's finished, I don't know. But it's 30 by 40, and it's got a figure. And but when it was a blank canvas, I'm thinking it's going to take a lot of paint. It's going to take you kind of walk your way through it without having done anything at all. You kind of look to the end, and you work your way back, and you think, I want to do that. And but it's you just kind of have to take a bite at a time and just start throwing paint at it, and that sounds easy. I know it's not quite that easy, but I think the way to work larger is just get a larger panel and start working larger. You have to get comfortable with it, and at first it's not. Nothing, the first time you do anything, it's not comfortable.
And bigger brushes and.
Bigger brushes. Bigger brushes are the key. I use 2-inch brushes and 3-inch brushes. But that's the way I paint. I mean, and that's the other thing too. That if you're doing, very tight traditional work, which most people want to do. Here, let me back up a little bit. I get people all the time, in workshops particularly, or they want to do a workshop with me, and they'll say, I want to be loose like you. And I said, okay, we can do that. That's easy. We're going to start with a bigger brush, and we're going to do more paint, and we're going to get a bigger panel and all this kind of stuff. They want to do, but they keep falling into this trap of doing tiny little paintings because their experience is limited. Their experience is photography. That's what they know, and even though they want to break edges and they want to simplify shapes and patterns and all this kind of stuff, in their head, their brain is working against them, and it says, that it needs to look like a photograph. And even though they'll say, I don't want it to look like a photograph, that is how it is. They're driving.
They default
to that.
Yeah. So how do you break them of it?
Well, one good exercise I use a lot is when I have a student come in, when I have people in workshops, they often will start. And I know you've seen this, and you've probably done it yourself. I know I have, where you start a painting. That first 10 minutes is, it's really pretty fresh. It's spontaneous, and there's some really wonderful, great stuff going on. And then the student will then take it and they basically drive it into the ground because they're trying to take it someplace. But what I try to do is have the students capture that freshness and keep it and not take it beyond that. And the way you do that is you have them paint something and you give them a time limit. And it has to be a short time limit. So, the first thought was, well, I can't do a painting. And you can. You just do it and put it on the floor and forget it, and just keep doing that. I did. My wife wanted to learn how to do. She wanted to do quick paint. She's an artist. She's a fiber artist, and she said, I think I can paint. She's never painted before, and I said, okay, I'll teach you how to paint. We're going to do a total immersion thing. And I'm going to teach you how to mix paint. I'm going to, show you something about values. But I'm just going to show. I'm going to give you a brush, and you're going to put it on there. And she ended in a course of, it was about 3 months. She did quick paints at Easton and Door County and down in Texas. And but I said, here's the deal, because I got to do my thing. You're going to have to do this on your own. But I said, here's a bunch of panels. You got 10 minutes on each one. Just paint the same thing over and over again. So, in 10 minutes, you shoot, and throw it on the floor. I said, at the end of that, at the end of an hour, you're going to have 6 paintings. There's got to be a gem in there somewhere. And now, is that the best way to learn? I don't know, but it does gives a student an opportunity to see something that they would have dismissed and covered up, and to see it as a finish or as a not finished or complete, but it's got some good bones to it, and so it seems to work pretty well. But you got to get them. It's just a matter of just let the painting do the work, and not try to drive it to some place where some other expectations. That's oftentimes for a lot of people, they don't have the skill level yet to get there.
Well, and I think if you give them examples, one of the mistakes that was made when I was learning to paint is that I didn't really have anything to rely on other than photographs, as you said. So mm-hmm. I didn't know a lot about art. I didn't know a lot about painters. And finally, somebody came along and said, okay, I want you, before you come to this workshop, I want you to pull out, 10 screenshots of 10 paintings that you absolutely have fallen in love with. And then the instructor pointed out to me, so you realize how loose this is, and look at this, there's nothing photographic about this. And so it was, in a way, it kind of gave me permission to realize it's okay to get loose, because there is that tendency driving us towards, photographs. And of course, people will come up when you're painting and they'll go, oh, it looks just like a photograph, which of course you want to wring their neck. but at the same time, it's a clue to you that maybe you need to loosen up a little bit.
Right, and to tell someone to loosen up that's not really enough information to because they probably know that, or they want it to be something else. But there are certain things, like I said, I break edges. Just breaking edges, is a small thing. Running a brush through, two different areas that cross an edge, and that breaks it up. But it's sometimes there really needs to be more to it than that. You were talking about photographs, and the people will use photographs, but I think they use them in the wrong ways. I think they're a great tool to be able to learn.
Do you paint from photographs?
Well, I do paint from photographs. Well, here's the deal. I don't. Well, let me caveat first. When I do an event, all events have rules, and and their number one rule is no photographs, which is fine. I don't really need photographs for doing the kinds of things that I do at events. But if I need some information, sometimes a photograph is a good tool to have. There's three things that we reference when we paint. We paint from direct observation, things in front of us. We can use photo reference, so that could be a drawing or it could be a study. Either we did it or somebody else did it. There's all kinds of printed references which you're looking at, so they, in a sense, they are direct observation as well. And then the third thing is, which I think is probably the most important, is memory. What we're doing when we're learning how to paint is we're building a memory of things we've done and ways of doing it that we can then incorporate into what we do when we go out in the field. And I think it's Robert Henry was in his book. He talks about it would be ideal if we could if you were again using a figure situation as an example, but he said what I'd have my students do is go upstairs to another room where the model is, and I'd sit and have them. They've got 15 minutes to look at the model and to make sketches or any kind of notes they want to, but then they come back down into the studio and actually make the painting from memory, and that's hard to do, but that's kind of what we're doing. Working from memory. But back to the photographs. The value of the photograph, I think, is the fact that if you understand what a photograph is, you can use it, I think, more efficiently. Yes, it doesn't give you all the information that you might get if you were standing out in the field, in terms of values and colors and that sort of thing, but it does give you the sense of pattern and shape, and that is really what's one of the key things to what we do, and I think gets overlooked. If I had a photograph of a tractor and I handed it to you and asked you what is this, you would say, well, number one, you'd either say it's a tractor, which it's not, or you'd say it's a photograph of a tractor, which it is, but it's really not that either. It's a piece of paper with light and dark patterns on it. And it's those light and dark patterns that we need to key on. So we're not painting a tractor, we're painting light and dark patterns. And that's the way it is with anything. We don't paint what's in front of us. We don't paint Grandma's house. We paint the light and dark shadows that, when put together, our brain says, oh, I understand that. I see that pattern, and I've seen it before. That's Grandma's house.
So you're really looking at that as abstract shapes.
And that's all it is. I mean, painting is abstraction, and so
right.
is photography, for that matter. It's not real. I mean, we think of photography as real. It's not real. It's an abstraction of it's just light patterns. Do you know the word pareidolia?
Never heard it.
Pareidolia is when you see the man in the moon or Jesus on a piece of toast. It's we see a dragon in the clouds.
It's pattern recognition.
It's pattern recognition. We look for that. It's a survival mechanism. We need to know that we're in the Serengeti plains and we're walking around and we see something. We need to know whether that's a lion or a rabbit, so we can respond to it. We need to know it immediately. And so our brains, our eyes see just like a camera does. It's just light and dark patterns that come in and it gets sent to our brain, and our brain then will look and see if it's got a symbol for that. And if it sees, it says, well, when those light and dark patterns are put together in that particular configuration, it's a tractor. And it's the same way when we're out in the field. You when you're looking at whatever it is, you need to be able to key on those light and dark patterns. And that's hard to do because your brain is wanting to override you and say, well, I know what that is, therefore let's get at it, because it's an efficiency thing that you need to somehow learn how to shut it off. When I was teaching figure drawing, I had a student one time, and she was in there. She had never drawn anything, and here she is in a figure drawing class, and she was really lost. I mean, she just couldn't do it. But we tried to persevere, and we had one day where the model I actually had reclining on the dais, and she was right down, kind of looking at the model from the top of the model's head. So you had these overlapping forms. You had, the head and the breasts and belly and knees and feet and whatever it is, and they were all stacked up because it was foreshortened. And she did really well. And the reason she did well is because she had no frame of reference. She had to respond to the shapes. It's like taking a photograph, and turning it upside down, the right side of the brain thing. If you've never done that, you need to do that because it will just blow you away how good you'll be able to respond to that image.
I do it all the time whenever I not so much with a photograph, but when I have a problem with a painting, I turn it upside down. Because then
Absolutely.
I can see the problem.
It's the same thing because when you turn it upside down, your brain still knows what it is, but it has to not only look at the positive, but it also has to look at the negative and sees all those shapes with the same hierarchy. So they all have the same value. So that that little negative space, which is a triangle, you'll see it as a triangle. If it's upside down, right side up, you won't see it because your brain says it's not important. I don't need to see that. And that's just the way it. That's the way you have to learn it. And and of course, and actually, if if someone's painting from photographs, if that's their only source, they should paint upside down all the time. There's no reason why not to. If a camera, the image that comes into a camera is upside down. When we see the prints from the old film days, you see a print. It comes back from Walgreens. It's you're actually looking, when you look at it right side up, you're actually looking at it upside down because that's not how it was captured. When you're out in the field, you can't turn the world upside down unless you have a camera obscura. You can, but if you don't, But my point is, if you can start understanding that image is not the thing that it is the patterns that the light and dark patterns. And understand those shapes. Again, when I do a lot of head studies, and when I do, the shadow that is created around the eye socket, that has a certain shape. If there's a light from above, it has a certain shape. If you put that shape in, it will describe that. And again, it's a bit of a symbol, but it's it will work every time. And the same thing when if a doorway in a dark doorway in a light in a building, you put a dark rectangle on a white field with a gable. It's a house with a door. We see it. What we're trying to do is communicate. When we make a painting, we're trying to communicate to the viewer, whether it's ourselves or somebody else. So they look at it and they go, "I've seen that before. I understand it." That's what representational art is all about. It's pareidolia.
Right. I went to a workshop recently. I won't mention the name of the instructor, but he said the opposite of what oftentimes people say. Most people say paint what you see. He said paint what you know. And he said, for instance, I know that I'm seeing a cool shadow, but I know it's going to work better as a warm shadow. And so he, and the same thing with shapes. He said, the same thing with every eye socket looks approximately like this. Every skull looks approximately like this. You have to capture that likeness, but you have to get, a sense of what people know, so it will represent itself as what you're trying to represent.
Well, I think there needs to be a balance, and this is kind of what my credo, if you will. When I go out, I want to find a balance between what I see and what I know. So that means that I'm not married to what's in front of me. However, that's my reference. So there are going to be certain things that I need to refer to. I'm looking at it, but I'm also really kind of pulling out things that I've either painted before, I know, or certain lights and darks, or certain warm colors, cool colors. I know what colors work together. I may not even know it. I may not be able to tell you which ones that I use and why I use them. I just know they work.
It's instinctive.
Just from experience, So,
So what, as we kind of get to the end of this thing, Lon, we've always got a lot of new plein air painters who are listening to this podcast around the world, and I always get the question of what's the best advice you can give somebody who's taking up plein air painting for the first time, or they're in their first year. What are the essentials if you were teaching beginners, other than what you talked about with the painting a lot of panels fast? What other essentials do you really try to nail with these people and get ingrained in their heads early on?
That's easy. You need to learn the skills. You need to learn the craft. Painting is fun, and it's no doubt, but you have to know. You have to know how to use your tools. You have to know, if you're an oil painter, you've got to know how much paint to put out on the palette, and when you don't have enough, you need to know that that's not enough, and a lot of that comes from, of course, from doing and doing. But if you don't know the craft, and it is a craft, and you don't have the skills of what to do with a brush and how to make different kinds of marks, then it really is, to go out and try to make a picture. It's like buying a violin and saying, I'm going to play a tune. No, you're not. You just, we all want that, but it's just not going to happen. You might accidentally hit something, but if you sit down and really, and I know that people don't, you always hear the story, well, I don't really want to spend that much time with the exercises, but I think it can be fun. I think, you're painting. What difference does it make, if you're painting? Whether you're just making marks on a page with a brush. I think, what I try to do is I try to instill in my students is enjoy the paint, not the picture. Forget the picture. Enjoy the paint, the quality of the paint, the butteriness of paint, and how when you pick it up with a brush, you can push it, you can pull it, you can drag it, you can wipe it off, you can put it back on again. And when you mix certain colors, they make a muddy color, but that can be beautiful as well. And it's just, get your hands in there and really appreciate that. Pictures will come later. In fact, sometimes pictures come and you're not even planning it. It's a matter of, but you have, and it takes an entire lifetime. I know I've had students say, well, I'm getting older and I don't have a whole lot of time left. I'm in that boat too. Yeah, but it's not like we're trying to make a chair and we're going to keep working until we make a good chair. It's a journey, and there is no end to it until we drop over. Then it ends. But
strive to enjoy the journey, and that's half the
journey.
battle.
The journey is huge, and I think that's that's my biggest advice. Forget the picture. You don't need the picture.
Well, and you've got to stop comparing yourself to other people too, because there's always going to be somebody who's better, and it's. For some reason, we know that if you're a brain surgeon, you have to go to however many years of school to be a brain surgeon. We know that if you're going to sit down at a keyboard, you can't just come up and slam the keys. We know that you have to learn the notes. We know you have to practice. You have to do all these things. But for some reason, we have this thing in our head that, well, an artist, it's all natural. It should be born talent. You should be able to paint a masterpiece right out of the box. I don't know where that comes from.
Well, and of course that's and that's the fallacy that if you can't do anything else, do art. But I take it a little more seriously than that, and I think most it's a serious endeavor. That's what I've always kind of in my head. I think, and actually, this comes out of when I was growing up. I mean, I'm growing up, and everybody says, "Well, yeah, you can be an artist. That's a great hobby to have." But when I finally realized being a painter is as valuable as being a doctor. It's a different kind of value, I suppose, or not. But there's so much intellectual endeavor that needs to go into making a painting. It's not just, you're not just setting up your easel and throwing paint and it's like, we got a pretty picture and put it in a frame. It doesn't work that way. It looks like it does for someone who's been doing it a long time. I've done paintings where I'll go in and I will paint for an hour or two and it's like, wow, I don't know how that came about. It came about from doing a lot of work.
Well, I can give you a list of doctors. I can give you a list of doctors who wish they were painters because they feel like they're mechanics many of them, they just get to the point where it's like routine.
Yeah.
Okay, this symptom, give them this solution, and they marvel at what we do, which is why so many doctors are becoming painters when they retire.
Right. Well, painting is problem solving. I mean, it's not making a picture; it's problem solving. You're figuring out. You're trying to take this gooey stuff in a tube and pick it up with a brush and put it on a flat surface and make it say something, whether it's abstract or whether it's representational. You're trying to, you're trying to, again, we get back to the pattern things. Can we put these patterns together, and can it then kick the brain and say, oh, I know what that is, and that's really kind of cool. That's a pretty complex thing. Is it more complex than music, or is it I don't know. I'm not a musician. I don't sing. I don't dance. I don't do any of that. But I know that no matter how much I do of this, and no matter how far I go along, I realize there's still so much I need to learn. And
I know. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and we were marveling at how we've been painting for so many years, and it's still a challenge. And yet it's the chasing of the challenge that makes it fun.
But you know what? Getting back to the skill thing, if you can get, if any artist can get, if you can get your skill level up to where then you don't have to think about it. Then you can get past that. I always think about it's went out of my head. But if you know how to make the marks, and you don't have to think about every single mark that you're putting down. You don't have to think about what color am I going to mix and how am I going to mix that, and try to figure it out, particularly in the field. You don't want to have that. You want to get all that out of the way so that so that when you are faced with something, you're working on a painting in the field, and you're faced with what color is that. You just know.
How do you get there?
Well, mix this and this. And if it doesn't come out exactly the way you'd say, well, that's not quite the green I wanted, but that green might work because I think I've seen that green work before. I'm going to use that green, and so it's getting yourself into a mess and then figuring out how to get out of it and knowing how to get out of it because you're making all these choices and all these.
How do you get there though? How do you get to that point of painting by instinct?
There is no painting by instinct. It's skill. It's skill. Just knowing your thing well enough, so that you don't have. Anytime that you come across a situation where you don't know what you're doing. Here's an example. I was doing a painting of a longhorn steer down in Texas, and a steer's a cow, kind of. So, and they're moving around in the field. So I'm doing this. Basically a cow with these big long horns, and I could get the body and I could get the head. I could not get those horns because I'd never experienced the horns. Not really. I've never really drawn the horns, and here I've got a moving target. They're like staircases going in opposite directions and curving this way and back way and back this way. And I worked on that for 3 hours, and what it told me was I got to go back to the studio and figure this thing out so that when I go back, I don't care what that steer does with his horns. I know what they do, so I don't have to, I don't have to struggle on site. It's just not, it's just not efficient. I want to know that. Anytime I don't know something, I want to know it. What does a horse's hoof look like? I'm not real sure, but I need to find that out so that I have it in my head. I may never use it, but I need to have that. And I think that it's that quest for getting as much knowledge. You should be able to paint anything from memory. And now, obviously, that's a lofty goal, but the more we can pull out of our head and particularly if we're doing representational, the more we pull out, the more we know when it's right and when it's not right.
Yeah. What I meant by instinct, I remember taking a photography workshop with Fred Picker in the zone system, and Fred said, "Look, I complained that we were not going out and taking pictures of pretty things or something, and he said, look, you have to learn to get to the point where you can create any effect, any light, any sense of what you can do with that camera. You've got to get that down before you go out and take pictures, because then it becomes an instinct." So it's not a natural instinct. It's a learned.
I think. Well, and I think another term might. It just it's just part of you. So I guess
exactly.
that would be essentially an instinct. Yeah.
Well, Lon, this has been fascinating. It's been a very quick time. You're a fascinating guy. You've got a lot of great information.
I have very much enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun.
Any final thoughts for everybody before we say sayonara?
Everybody stay safe and stay well, and let's get back out to painting, because it's this sitting at home is just not cutting it. So I hope we can get back out and get back to work, because
absolutely,
there's just a lot of stuff to do. So.
Well, Lon, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you as well. Take care.
Well, thanks again to Lon Brauer. What a fabulous painter he is. Are you guys ready for some marketing ideas?
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
In the Marketing Minute, I try to answer your art marketing questions that you submit to eric@artmarketing.com. We also have the Marketing Minute as its own podcast if you want to look it up. Here's a question from Amanda in Houston. Oh, it's Amanda Houston in Cornelius, Oregon. Sorry about that, Amanda. Amanda says, how do I evaluate which publication to go deep into? I assume she means advertising. If I want to be in the waters where the money is flowing, which is a term I teach in marketing, which publication will allow me to grow my list of collectors and potential galleries, art brokers, interior designers, etc.? Well, Amanda, it goes back to your strategy. You have mentioned a list of growing strategy, but 4 different areas of focus. You've said galleries, collectors, art brokers, designers. You need to pick one. Which is your 80%er? Which is the one that if you got nothing else, you go after that one particular one? I don't think you should try to go after all 4. I don't think there's any publication that's really going to give you all 4. If you want designers, you might want to spend massive amounts of money for a page in Architectural Digest, or maybe it's a local designer thing in your community. If you want art collectors, who are looking for representational art, and you want really rich ones, you go with something like Fine Art Connoisseur. But if you want plein air collectors, those people happen to be in PleinAir magazine. So there's a lot of different things, and you've got to kind of decide which you want. Galleries are a low target because you can't control your career with galleries as effectively, and you won't get your prices up until you're in their high demand top tier. Now, I'm not trashing galleries. I think they're a really good idea, but we put a lot of emphasis on galleries, I think, earlier in our careers because we think, they're going to solve my problems. The problem with having a gallery is that if you have only one, then you're relying on their ability to sell. And if they mess up or they have a bad month or a bad year, you're going to have a bad month or bad year. That's why I want to control things. I want to control who and how who I sell my art through and how I sell it. And that way you can control your pricing, you can get your prices up, etc. With a 3-year branding campaign, that's going to help you because branding helps you get your prices up. It's going to help you get your galleries. It's going to help you get in a lot of different people, collectors, and so on. You can reach galleries and collectors through one publication, typically like the one that I mentioned. But designers, big world, national, local, the cost to reach them can be, 100 times the cost of reaching art collectors. It just depends on how you want to approach it. So first and foremost, Amanda, get your strategy down. And once your strategy is down, that will make a huge difference in what you decide to chase, right? Okay. Next question comes from Mark Dickerson in Mission Vallejo, California, who says, I have a quick question. I know you've talked about this in the podcast. I don't have gallery representation yet, but when I do get a chance, I really want them to be my art marketing partner, and I want to offer the gallery a percentage of everything I create, even if it never hangs in their gallery. I want them to know we are in this together. How much of a percentage should I pay the gallery for any work I produce that never hangs in their gallery? 25%. I want to have this figured out so when I get a chance to partner with a gallery, I'm ready to offer them to be my partner in all of my art. Mark, respectfully, why would you do that? I think that the idea of having a gallery partnership, if a gallery sells something for you, typically they want somewhere between 40 and 60%, depending on your stature. Like if you're a high-level artist, you might get paid 60%. They keep 40%. If you're a newbie, they might keep 60%. But somewhere around that 50% area is what they're going to pay. But they get paid for what they sell. Now, I'm not suggesting selling around them, but why would you give a gallery a percentage of everything you sell, even if they don't do it for you? I think that would be folly. Now, I think it goes back to what I said earlier, is that a lot of people want to advocate. They don't want to delegate. They want to advocate. The idea is you delegate to a gallery and you say, okay, your responsibility is we agree to that you're going to sell my paintings at this percentage for a certain period of time and hopefully so many per month. You can't predict that exactly. But when you advocate, you're just saying, here, take over my career and run with it. And the problem is when you have somebody taking over your career, they may not do it as effectively as you want them to. And, it's like, say, okay, you hire a manager and you say, okay, go do whatever you want to do. Well, all of a sudden, that manager has spent all your money and run off with your wife, and you just never know. So you've got to be really careful about advocating versus delegating, and I think that's a really important thing to think about. So, typically 50% is what the gallery gets, and I like to have a balance. I think that every artist should have a certain percentage of their work, a certain type of their work that they're selling direct. And that, some galleries don't like that, and I understand that. And if they're willing to give you enough of a good deal and enough sales, then it might be worth allowing them to do that. I know people who do it very effectively. But I don't want my art to be in one gallery and then sit there for months and not sell. I need those paintings to sell to be able to pay my bills. And so as a result, you want to have something, I like to have balance. I like, sometimes there's hot markets. There was a time when Silicon Valley was really hot and people were spending money there. There were times that certain vacation spots were hot and there were other cities that were not. So I like the idea of having my work in an area that's hot as well as 2 or 3 other areas maybe. And that way, and there are also economies that are based on seasons. So, like if you have a gallery in Cape Cod, they're not going to sell much in the winter, probably. If you have a gallery in Hawaii, they may not sell much in the summer. That you've got a ski resort. Well, ski resort probably is popular in summer and winter. So you got to kind of figure that out. And I like to spread the risk to at least 3 and sometimes a little bit more. I personally am only in one gallery, and that's because I can only produce a certain amount of work because I don't paint for a living. And I just got a call that gallery is thinking about closing their doors. And so what do? Now I got to figure out a new gallery to go into, right? So I think you want to make sure that you have control, and I didn't have control in that particular case. Anyway, I hope this is helpful. This has been the Marketing Minute.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
Well, a reminder to get your tickets for the PleinAir convention. It's going to be taking place in August in Santa Fe. Yes, it's still taking place. As far as we know, if we have to cancel, you get your money back, or you can if we reschedule, you can push your money to a rescheduled event. Also want to remind you that the PleinAir Salon is going to be wrapping up here at the end of the month. You want to get your entry in at PleinAirSalon.com. And last but not least, certainly not least, brand new event. It's called PleinAir Live, and it's going to be taking place globally, a virtual event you can do from your living room. You do not want to miss this. You're going to be part of the global plein air community. We're trying to get every plein air painter on earth on this. It's going to be very cool, and you don't have the travel expenses and all the other things that go in with a live event. So make sure you check that out. And if you've not seen my blog where I talk about life and art and other things, check it out. It's called Sunday Coffee, and you can find it at coffeewitheric.com. Well, this is always fun, and we will do it again sometime, like next week, hopefully, God willing. We'll see you then. I'm Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. Remember, it's a big world out there. Go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
This has been the PleinAir Podcast with PleinAir Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.